Hi, everybody. So, what are ethics? So, this is the question that we're going to briefly explore. What is ethics? The university has a university learning objective number 5 that talks all about ethics, and I have provided that for you in all of your course materials so you can see all of what that entails. But we are going to discuss more globally what ethics really means. So, ethics are moral principles that govern how you behave, and they're rooted in your own personal values. It's the rules by which you live your life and let others live theirs. This discussion is really a continuum of the values identification process that we covered in week 1 of this semester. Your core values drive your morals and ethical decisions in the same way that a company's core values dictate how they're going to conduct their operations. To believe that we can actually cover this entire subject in one PowerPoint presentation is very unrealistic. There are people that have made ethics a career with so many subsets in many different fields. In fact, if you were going to look through the BSU catalog, you would see there are many classes just within Boise State that cover the topic of ethics. There's a health law and ethics class, there's ethics for addiction professionals, there's professional ethics, there's business law ethics. So it's a very broad, generalized topic that can be very subjective at times. So we're just going to cover it as best we can for the purposes of this class. So during this session, we're going to read several sources and watch a few video clips just to give you a brief general understanding of basic ethical concepts, their relation to one another, and their relevance to the subject of inquiry as outlined in the University Learning Objective number 5. So most of you are already out in the workplace and you understand the basic ethics of the environment that you're in. The purpose of this lesson is not to teach you ethics, but rather to prepare you and allow you to identify and accurately describe the issue of interest. Identify factual and ethical questions relevant to certain issues that we're going to discuss later on. So when you reflect back to your personal core values that we have recently re-examined, take note of how you view the world and what your morals really are. This will be important as we move forward with reading Half the Sky. In the book, you're beginning to see that there are so many other worldviews, very different than your own probably, especially in terms of the interactions amongst other people. For example, if your core value is to make money at all costs without respect to the impact on others, then those people and situations around you are going to be affected reflecting that value. So let's look at the word moral. Concerning or relating to what is right and wrong in human behavior. This becomes the core of the issue with morals. We often think about what is right and wrong, and we proselytize to one another about this argument, but not much mind or forethought is placed upon who is setting these standards and why. Oftentimes we hear what is right for you may not be right for me, and that lends itself to the idea that morals at their very essence are extremely subjective. Hence why it's so vital for you to have a deep understanding of your own core values in order to function in a society that isn't always on par with your own ideas. A question I pose to you is, will your core values change over time? The answer to that is yes, hopefully. They will and do change over time as we grow and change and experience life. We become more in tune, more introspective, more wise. As you become more aware of the world around you, it's more than likely that they will change, and I hope that this class is a small step in that discovery of problems that you may not have previously even thought about or considered. One small example from my personal life is the ocean and reef conservation and the plastic prevalence in the environment. Prior to living here in Hawaii, I grew up in Idaho, where the health of the ocean was so far from my paradigm. And once I moved here to Hawaii and spent every day in the ocean, you start to hear about different laws that are being created, for example, outlawing certain sunscreens to use in the ocean because they harm the reefs. And plastic bags here are illegal, as in many states. Just different things that you weren't previously aware of that have changed my personal core values, expanded, and have changed when it comes to the awareness of these different things. So just one small example on how your core values and morals and ethics can grow and change with you. We all subscribe to the same basic standards in order to function together in society. In a community, we have an agreed upon set of standards that are often codified into laws and that clearly state what the moral standard is within that community or even in business settings. Such moral standards allow us to function together in society, and the assumption is that all members of that community subscribe to the basic premise of that standard. One example is driving on the right side of the road. Imagine if there were people who didn't subscribe to that standard. Obviously, we would have a lot of traffic jams and terrible accidents. So some examples in helping define what the word moral means completely, let's look at a few examples of the use of the word moral. So a moral obligation to help the poor. We see this a lot in Half the Sky and a lot of the charity work that's done within this book. There's a moral obligation to help the poor. So that is their driving factor, and that's part of their core values. Another is, for example, each story teaches an important moral lesson in Charles Dickens' books. So he has some amazing messages within his books. For example, Oliver Twist. It's about corrupt orphanage and workhouse situation in a system that actually hung children for stealing handkerchiefs. Another example is Uncle Tom's Cabin. It was about the slavery system in the South and the moral lesson that came down to the fact that slaves are real people. So within so many examples in literature and throughout culture, you're going to find moral examples and the use of that word being very ubiquitous. So now let's consider ethics as a manifestation of our moral basis. Again, keep in mind that your core values create your morals, which in turn create your ethics. It's all one big continuum of how you choose to live your life and how you choose to treat others. So rules of behavior based on ideas about what is morally good and bad. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about ethics. It's really the standard that was mentioned before where the rules are developed, be they written or unwritten, about how you should conduct yourself. Years ago, a person's word was their bond. If someone told you that they would do something, that was all you needed from them was a simple handshake. Things are fairly different now. The problem is that our moral grounds have shifted and enough folks don't subscribe to the same commonly agreed upon rules of behavior. So now, understandably, it must be in writing if we want certain rules to be adhered to. So think about the issues and the ethics involved. So several examples I'm going to give you coming up. What I want you to do now is just think about your own personal core values and then have a look at the following situations and see how they line up with your personal core values. Admittedly, these are extreme situations, but you'll get the idea. It's a valuable practice to hold your own core values and morals up against a situation and see how they compare. This produces reasoned evaluations of different type of value systems and ethical claims without prejudice, and allows you a general understanding of affinities and fundamental differences between alternative value systems. You're going to come across this so much in this book that we read, and it's really important to have your own foundation set solidly so that you can see another perspective and try to understand where they may be coming from. So Hitler's Germany. So there were times that Hitler was surrounded with children as propaganda photo op. As a true supporter of Darwin's origin of the species theory, he was determined that he was going to help speed along natural selection by eliminating those populations that were, in his mind, not fit to survive and create a super race of humans. To that end, he had parents with children with disabilities register their children, and as his program progressed, the children were picked up and taken to a facility and euthanized, because as he saw it, they were taking up space and resources in society. And when considering the ethical notions of his ideas, remember that he got an entire nation to subscribe to his way of thinking. And even now, there are still those who don't believe that Hitler was wrong.